Hello everyone, this is Heroes Trivia, and today we're going to cover what happened at the Lesser Thunderclap Temple during the original Journey to the West. This, of course, corresponds to the plot of the third chapter of the game, Black Myth Wukong, titled White Snow, Ice Cold. For those who have the novel and want to follow along, the stories covered in this video will be from chapters 65 and 66. Now our story begins as the full party of Tang Seng, sitting atop of his white dragon prince horse, and his three disciples in Wukong, Wuneng, and Wujing, continued on their journey west until they once again approached the towering mountain. Looking from afar, Tang Seng noted how the mountain seemed to connect seamlessly with the sky above and questioned how tall the mountain must be. This offhanded inquiry would spark a brief debate between Tang Seng's three disciples, as Wukong stated that even the tallest mountain can't reach the heavens, while Bajie countered that if that was indeed the case, then why would the Kunlun mountain be nicknamed the Sky Pillar? Explaining to Bajie, Wukong claimed that the far northwestern region where the Kunlun mountain stood has a hole in the sky, and that the name Sky Pillar is meant to show how the mountain stood as a plug for this hole. And before the argument would escalate, Shaseng butted in to dismiss Bajie's claim, as he also took the position that while the mountain had seemed tall, it would surely not reach the sky. And to prove it, all they have to do is continue their journey, as the mountain stood in their way westward. Soon as the party entered the mountain, all sorts of beasts such as tigers and wolves came out of the woodworks eyeing potential prey. While this scene would spook Tang Seng, Wukong simply took out his staff and let out a deafening roar as the wild beasts of this mountain tucked their tails between their legs, turned around, and fled away from the main road, clearing a path for the party to continue up the mountain. However, just as the party cleared the first tall ridge, the sight of a grand temple appeared in the distance. Now, despite having auspicious clouds lingering over the temple and the faint echoing of the temple prayer bells hovering in the air, Wukong questioned aloud why he sensed the evil intention underneath what seemed like the Thunderclap Temple. For those who don't know, the Thunderclap Temple, which sit atop of Lingshan, or the Spirit Mountain, is the home of Buddha and the final destination for Tang Seng's party, as the whole point of the journey to the west was to reach the Thunderclap Temple, meet Buddha, and receive the scriptures. So when Wukong questioned why the appearance of the Grand Temple ahead reminded him of the Thunderclap Temple, Tang Seng immediately felt the urge to go inside and pay his respects, as Tang Seng now questioned if their journey was complete, and that this tall mountain that they are on is in fact the fabled Spirit Mountain, or Lingshan. Trying to protect his confused master, Wukong explained that this is definitely not the real Thunderclap Temple, as he had personally been to the Spirit Mountain many times in the past, and while the temple ahead reminded him of the real Thunderclap Temple, it was definitely not the real thing. And just to be safe, Wukong recommended his master to avoid the temple ahead entirely, as he feared that a copy of the Thunderclap Temple in the middle of nowhere can only mean an ambush inside. But with Tang Seng insisting to check out the temple, and with Bajie and Shaseng both agreeing that nothing bad can come from a Buddhist temple, especially one this grand, the party continued onward. And by the time they came upon the temple gate, Tang Seng looked up on the nameplate and read the characters Lei Yin Si, or the Thunderclap Temple. Believing that he had now completed the journey westward, Tang Seng quickly got off his horse, bowed down at the temple gate, and started to scold Wukong for almost making the mistake of guiding them away from their final destination. Smiling back at his master, Wukong told Tang Seng to look up again and carefully read the nameplate, as it had one additional character. So looking up again, Tang Seng noticed this time that the character xiao, meaning small or lesser, preceded Lei Yin Si. So altogether, this is the lesser Thunderclap Temple. But despite this, Tang Song argued that even if this was not the true Thunderclap temple, it was still a Buddhist temple nonetheless, with Buddhist statues and scriptures inside. And with so many Buddhist entities residing across the land, who knows if this temple actually houses a true Buddhist deity? Sensing that Tang Song was determined to go inside no matter what, Wukong gave his final warning, as he sternly told Tang Song that if they go inside and there is danger inside, then he does not want to be responsible for the results, as he still believed it is best for them to avoid this temple entirely. Assuring Wukong that paying their respects to the statue of Buddhist deities would not result in any harm, Tang Song ordered Ba Jie to prepare his jiasha or Buddhist robe, as he wanted to look his best in front of Buddha. And just as Tang Song was changing into his full set of proper monk attires, including his robe, hat, and cloak, a booming voice echoed from inside the temple gate, accusing Tang Song of rudely dallying outside the home of Buddha, and that if he was sincere in his journey to the West, he should enter immediately and pay his proper respect. Surprised that the temple even knew his name, Tang Song only became farther convinced that a true Buddhist deity was inside, as he, Ba Jie, and Sha Song quickly kneeled down outside an apology before entering. Unamused, Wukong followed behind with the horse and luggage in hand. Now, as Tang Song and the party rushed into the main hall of the temple, the sight of the various Buddhist deities and disciples, such as the 500 Arhat or Luo Han, and the 4 Vajra protectors or Jinggang, and the 8 Bodhisattva or Pusa, and many others, overwhelmed Tang Song as he busied himself bowing down non-stop to each and every one of these Buddhist deities inside the main hall. Falling behind their master, Ba Jie and Sha Song also followed suit, bowing to every deity, but Wukong stood tall in the back, refusing to bow down to these fake deities in his eyes, until Buddha himself, sitting on the lotus altar in the center of the room, spoke up and asked Wukong why he was not bowing down to him. Squinting to get a good look at this supposed Buddha in front of him, Wukong confirmed his suspicions as his all-seeing eye revealed the monster's true form. Quickly tossing aside the ropes of the horse and luggage, Wukong pulled out his staff from his ear as he leaped up to strike at this false Buddha, while scolding the monster for his audacity to transform himself into the form of the Buddha. But before Wukong's staff could make contact, the Buddha figure tossed a pair of golden cymbals into the air, and within one split second, the pair of cymbals let out a loud ringing sound as they closed themselves together right over Wukong, enclosing him inside. Witnessing their senior disciples' capture, Ba Jie and Sha Song quickly pulled out their weapons, but with so many monsters turned deities surrounding them in the Great Hall, they were all eventually subdued, as Tang Song, Ba Jie, and Sha Song would all be tied up and moved to the back of the temple. At this point, the Buddha figure, along with all the various Buddhist disciples and deities, reverted back to their original monster forms, and also left the Great Hall to celebrate in the back, leaving behind the golden symbol that now rested upon the lotus altar, with Wukong still trapped inside. And according to the leader who had previously taken the form of Buddha, the golden symbols should be able to turn Wukong into nothing but a puddle of blood and flesh after exactly 3 days. Now, inside the pair of enclosed symbols, Wukong was pulling out every trick he knew in order to escape this dark and hot place. First, he tried to use his staff to break this symbol, but no matter how hard he struck, not even a scratch would form. So next, Wukong tried to transform himself into a towering giant, but no matter how tall he grew inside the symbol seems to magically grow with him. And with being tall not working, Wukong then tried to turn himself as small as possible to see if he can find a crease, somewhere to escape. But much like when he was growing taller, no matter how much he shrunk himself, the symbol magically shrunk with him, and even when he got down to the size of a small vegetable seed, there was not a gap in sight. So now, hoping to create a gap for himself, Wukong then transformed his staff into a drill, as he then drilled for thousands of rotations, hoping to create a hole in the symbol. But much like before, aside from making some squeaking noises during the drilling, the symbol was entirely unharmed. Having exhausted his options inside, Wukong is now panicking, as he quickly recited a Buddhist and Taoist chant to summon the Buddhist gatekeepers of the 5 directions, the 6 secondary and 6 primary Taoist zodiac deities, and the 18 Buddhist temple protectors, who were all in charge of keeping watch over Tangseng during this journey, as they would appear outside the symbol once they heard the summoning chant. Questioning why Wukong had summoned them, this collective of deities quickly got an overview of what had just happened at the Lesser Thunderclap Temple, before Wukong asked them to try to open this pair of symbols from the outside, as the dark and hot space inside was suffocating him. But no matter what these deities tried, the pair of enclosed symbols wouldn't budge one bit. So with no solution in sight, the gatekeepers of the 5 directions decided to seek more outside help, as the 6 secondary deities were sent in secret to the back of the temple to keep watch over Tangseng's safety, while the 6 primary were assigned to remain watch over Wukong and the symbol, while the 18 temple protectors spread out to keep watch in the entire surrounding area, as the 5 gatekeepers departed for the Celestial Court. Heading directly through the south gate of the Celestial Court without reporting to the 4 heavenly kings that were guarding it, these 5 Buddhist deities rudely arrived in front of the Celestial Emperor without being properly summoned, as they wasted no time to explain the predicament that Wukong was in at the Lesser Thunderclap Temple. Immediately, the Celestial Emperor ordered the 28 constellation deities to the rescue, and by the time they would arrive at the Lesser Thunderclap Temple, it was already in the wee hours of the night, as all the monsters had fallen sound asleep after having their celebration the evening before. After checking in on Wukong, the 28 constellation deities first rejected Wukong's suggestion of just smashing the symbol to pieces with their weapons, as they worried that the sound of metal clashing would wake up all the monsters. So instead, Wukong suggested that they can try to wedge their weapons into the edge of the symbol to see if they can leverage a gap for him to escape from, as he would just need the smallest crease to get out. But after 2 hours of fruitless effort, the symbol remained shut. At this point, Kang Jinlong, the 2nd constellation deity of the Eastern Quadrant, came up with a plan, as she suggested that given the elastic nature of the magical symbol, she could try to first transform her horn into a thin needle, jam it into the edge of the symbol, before transforming back to her regular size, which should allow the symbol to also enlarge to fit her larger horn. Hopefully, at that point, the horn would be able to reach inside and create somewhat of a gap for Wukong to escape from. So with this plan in place, Kang Jinlong first transformed her horn into a thin needle, as she then exhausted herself to finally wedge her horn into the edge of the symbol. Now securely inside, she transformed back to her regular size, and taking advantage of the elastic magical properties of the symbol, her horn finally pierced the enclosure and reached Wukong inside. But unfortunately, the elastic magic of the symbol was so precise that there was not any gap created, despite being pierced by Kang Jinlong's horn, as the edges of the parasymbol enclosed perfectly around the horn. With no other way, Wukong told Kang Jinlong to be prepared to endure some pain, as Wukong would transform his staff back into a drill. And now, instead of drilling at the seemingly indestructible symbol, Wukong was drilling directly into the tip of Kang Jinlong's horn. This brought great pain to Kang Jinlong, But soon, a tiny hole was created at the tip of her horn that would allow Wukong to transform himself into a small, tiny vegetable seed, as he would nestle himself into Kang Jinlong's horn, and Kang Jinlong then transformed her horn back to a small needle and pulled and tugged with all her might to finally pull herself out of the symbol. And just as Kang Jinlong collapsed onto the ground, Wukong transformed back to his regular size, and in that moment of frustration, he smashed his staff right into the symbol as it broke, scattering into thousands of pieces. Unfortunately, this smash also created such a loud sound that all the monsters inside the temple jolted awake. As war drums sounded and the monsters gathered, Wukong and the deities leaped into the air as they prepare for the fight ahead. For aside from saving Wukong, they still had to save Tang Seng and the two other disciples. While all of this was going on, the leader of these monsters, who had previously taken the form of Buddha, had arrived in the Great Hall, as he would carefully gather up all the shards of the broken golden symbol first, before lining up all the monsters for battle. Now, without the golden symbol, the monster's weapon became a short and limp wolf-teeth mace, as he would point his weapon at Wukong and dared him to come down and face him in melee combat. Getting a good look at this monster for the very first time, Wukong noted that this monster looked somewhat like a human, but was also clearly a monster. His hair flowed freely and was held together with a golden circlet atop of his head. His teeth was sharp, and his nose was big and flat with massive nostrils. But the most notable feature on his face was a pair of sharp and long yellow eyebrows. Pointing his staff back at this yellow brow monster, Wukong asked what kind of monster he was and why he dared to imitate the likeness of Buddha. Answering Wukong's inquiry, Yellowbrow states that his name is Yellowbrow Buddha, but you can call me the Yellowbrow King or your Yellowbrow Granddaddy. I have named this land the Lesser Western Heavens, and my temple is the Lesser Thunderclap Temple because I have achieved true enlightenment and reached Buddhahood. I also know about your journey west, which is why I set this trap to lure you and your master in. And now I want to propose a bet with you. If we fight here and you win, then I will release your master and fellow disciples and allow you to continue on your journey. However, if we fight here and I win, then I'll replace your entire party with a party of my own, as we will go on and receive the rewards of Buddhahood from Buddha instead, and finish this journey for you. Smirking back at Yellowbrow's proposal, Wukong simply said, "If you want to bet, then come and have a taste of my staff," as the two of them started to engage each other. Now, while Wukong's staff was strong and hard, Yellowbrow's short and limp wolf-teeth mace acted as a sponge, as it managed to absorb all of Wukong's strikes without any difficulty, as 50 exchanges would go on without either side gaining any upper hand. During this entire exchange between the two leaders, the numerous monsters below were trying to cheer on their leader as they sounded gongs and drums to help boost their morale. At the same time, the various deities also proceeded to draw their weapons as they formed an encirclement around Yellowbrow in the air. And seeing their king surrounded, the monsters started to worry as the drums ceased and the gongs went quiet. But just as it seemed that Wukong and the various deities would be able to tame the Yellowbrow monster, Yellowbrow pulled out a plain and old-looking sack with his offhand as he opened the sack and tossed it into the air. Then in a blink of an eye, the sack sucked Wukong and all the various deities right in, as Yellowbrow would win the fight and return back to his temple. And upon his victorious return, Yellowbrow ordered his monsters to find some rope, as he would go on to empty the captured deities and Wukong from his sack. Upon leaving the sack, everyone who was captured felt exhausted and lied limp on the ground, unable to resist, as the monsters would quickly tie everyone up and also toss them in the back of the temple. And it would take until the middle of the night for Wukong to finally recover his strength as he heard Tang Seng's cries coming from the other room. Mixed in with the tears, Tang Sung was also lamenting and blaming himself on how he did not listen to Wukong earlier and how he worried about Wukong's fate inside the symbol, as at this point, Tang Sung still did not know about the events of the previous day. Touched by his master's concern, Wukong quickly transformed himself smaller, which easily allowed him to free himself from the ropes. Then he snuck over to his master's room to free Tang Sung, Ba Jie, and Sha Sung, before returning to free the various deities, as this entire group would end up making a clean escape in the middle of the night. After everyone was safe outside of the temple, Wukong told everyone that he still needed to sneak back into the temple to try to retrieve the luggage. Hearing this, Kang Jinglong tried to talk Wukong out of this idea, as she felt material goods were simply not worth Wukong taking the risk. But Wukong quickly explained that their passports, as well as the robe and bowl gifted by Guan Yin, were all still in their luggage, and they simply cannot continue without these items. So with Wukong heading back, everyone else moved farther away from the temple, as they would finally leave the mountain and find a flat area to wait for Wukong's return. Now back at the temple, Wukong would transform himself into a bat as he flew in to look for their luggage. And after searching through the first two buildings, Wukong finally spots the glow from Tang Sung's robe in the third building, as it seemed that the monsters have rummaged through their luggage before leaving everything scattered on the ground. Trying to pile everything back together in a hurry, Wukong thought he had the luggage all packed, but the moment he lifted everything up, one of the bags spilled open as the items inside crashed loudly onto the floor. Once again, all the monsters would wake up, as they would soon discover that everyone had escaped. Knowing that he would have no chance if he ended up being surrounded by all the monsters inside the temple, Wukong had to ignore the luggage and simply slip away before he would be discovered. But even with Wukong escaping, Yellowbrow and the rest of the monsters soon started to search the mountain for signs of Tang Sung and the rest of the deities, as it wouldn't take long for them to get discovered, as they were still waiting obliviously for Wukong's return. Now, instead of Wukong and the luggage coming back to them, it was Yellowbrow and upwards of 5,000 monsters that were charging at them, as Ba Jie, Sha Sung, and the various deities had no choice but to stand and fight, as they still had to protect Tang Sung. And as these two sides engaged each other, Wukong would make his return to join the fight as well, as Wukong, Ba Jie, and Sha Sung would take on the Yellowbrow, while the rest of the deities fought off the thousands of regular monsters. Starting from dawn, this fight would last all day until the moon would come up, which is when Yellowbrow decided to pull his sack once more. This time, Wukong was quite alert to this magical sack, as he would immediately use his Nimbus Cloud to jump away to safety, while everyone else would be captured once again. Seeing that Wukong had fled far away, Yellowbrow contently returned to his temple, tied everyone up again, and this time locked all the deities in an underground dungeon as he awaited for Wukong's return. Meanwhile, floating in the air far away, Wukong landed himself atop of the peak of Mount Dong, as he would tear up and cry about his master's fate, for it seemed that every step his master takes is filled with trials and challenges. And after calming down a while later, Wukong plotted his next steps. First, he ruled out going back to the Celestial Court, as he worried the Celestial Emperor would blame him for getting the 28 constellation deities captured. So Wukong came up with a backup plan, as he intended to visit Mount Wudang and seek the help of the Taoist Protector of the North, who held the titles of True Martial Great Emperor and the Heavenly Lord who subdued demons. And with one hop atop of his Nimbus Cloud, Wukong would arrive at Mount Wudang, where he would request for the audience of the Heavenly Lord who subdued demons. And after hearing about everything that had happened at the Lesser Thunderclap Temple, the Heavenly Lord explained to Wukong that he had long been put in charge of the Northern Realm by both the Celestial Court and the founding deity of Taoism. So the happenings of the Western Realm is not under his jurisdiction. This means that he would not be able to go help Wukong in person. However, he will lend a hand by sending the turtle and snake generals, who are his mount, and 5 dragons to help Wukong rescue his master and the other deities. Wasting no time, Wukong and his new reinforcement rushed back to the Lesser Thunderclap Temple and issued a direct challenge to Yellowbrow. Now, when the patrolling monsters reported the sight of Wukong along with a turtle-looking monster, a snake-looking monster, and 5 dragons back to Yellowbrow, Yellowbrow knew right away that Wukong must have spent the last 2 days seeking more reinforcements. But unafraid, Yellowbrow marched out of the temple and yelled out to Wukong, asking him what deities and dragons he brought back this time. And after getting a brief response highlighting that they were subordinates of the Heavenly Lord who subdued demons, Yellowbrow wasted no time as he pulled out his wolf-teeth mace, and the two sides went at it. With the dragons summoning wind and rain, while the turtle and snake generals fought with more conventional weapons, this fight would continue for roughly an hour before Yellowbrow had enough, as he would free himself from the melee and pull out his sack once again. Having experienced the power of the magical sack before, Wukong quickly yelled out to alert everyone before leaping high into the air himself. Unfortunately for Wukong's new aides, they had no idea what the sack was capable of, so despite Wukong's verbal warning, they would all be sucked into the sack, much like the constellation deities before them, as Yellowbrow would once again return victorious, tie them up, and throw them into the dungeon as well. Wukong, on the other hand, did make his escape, but there was nothing to be happy about, as Yellowbrow remained undefeated, as yet another batch of reinforcements are now captured by the sack. Feeling a bit depressed and hopeless, Wukong jumped off from his cloud and found himself a random mountain peak to lay down and rest. And just before he would fall asleep, a voice called out to him from the sky, as is said, "Grand Sage, this is not the time to sleep, as your master's life hangs in the balance." Taking a look around him, Wukong quickly identified the approaching deity as one of the 4 imperial attendants of the underworld. Not in any mood for pleasantries, Wukong scolded back at this minor deity for disturbing his rest, as Wukong threatened to smack him a couple times with his staff as a means to vent out his frustrations, especially considering how the 4 imperial underworld attendants were also responsible for protecting Tang Song during this journey to the west. Sensing that Wukong was in a terrible mood, the attendant immediately informed Wukong that Tang Song and his fellow disciples were all hanging in the main hall, while all the captured deities were suffering in the dungeon. And even though they're all still safe for the time being, it is still of the utmost importance for Wukong to seek additional help right away. Hearing this, Wukong couldn't help but to start sobbing to the attendant, as he explained that he had already exhausted all his options. In Wukong's mind, with the constellation deities all captured, he couldn't return to the Celestial Court for help. With the gatekeepers of Buddhism and the temple protectors captured, he couldn't bear to turn to Buddha for help. And finally, with now the turtle, snake, and dragons of the Heavenly Lord captured, he also no longer can turn to the subduer of demons for more help. Smiling back at Wukong, the attendant shared a place where he believes Wukong can find more help, as he pointed to the city of Bincheng in the southern continent, where the Grand Sage Bodhisattva Guo Shivang resided, as this Bodhisattva has a student named the Crown Prince Xiaozhang, who also commands 4 deity generals. As this felt like his last hope, Wukong quickly instructed the attendant to keep a careful watch over Tang Song's safety before jumping back onto his cloud and speeding his way to Bincheng. Now, after arriving and making his way to the temple of the Guo Shivang Pusa, or Bodhisattva, Wukong was greeted by his disciple, the Crown Prince Xiaozhang, as Guo Shivang Pusa had already predicted Wukong's arrival. And after explaining why he was there, Wukong was informed that while the Guoshivang Pusa himself could not offer his aid directly, as he must remain behind during the approaching summer season to tame the floods and the river monsters, his disciple, the Crown Prince Xiaozhang, and his 4 deity generals can offer a hand in helping to defeat Yellowbrow. So much like before, Wukong left with his new reinforcement as they rushed back to the Lesser Thunderclap Temple to challenge Yellowbrow once again. And once again, the two sides made brief introductions as Yellowbrow learned the origins of Wukong's latest round of reinforcement. Particularly interesting is that the Crown Prince Xiaozhang is called the Crown Prince because he was originally from a far western kingdom of the Flowing Sand, where his father was the king. But because the Crown Prince was born sickly, he sought all manners of ways to save himself, which is when he met his current master in the Guoshivang Pusa, who offered him a remedy for his illness on the condition that he would forsaken his throne and instead become a student on the path towards cultivation and immortality. And after hearing his backstory, Yellowbrow mocked the Crown Prince as he taunted him with threats of ending his path towards immortality right here, right now, as the two sides would engage each other in open melee. On one side, the Crown Prince used a spear, while the 4 deity generals used swords. Yellowbrow would start off the fight by only using his wolf teeth mace, but soon after, Yellowbrow would get bored, as he would pull out the sack once more, and exactly like before, Wukong tried to alert everyone, but to no avail, as once again, everyone but Wukong would get captured by Yellowbrow's magical sack. And almost like deja vu, Yellowbrow would return to throw these new deities into his dungeon, while Wukong would flee once again to safety, this time on a mountain west of the Lesser Thunderclap Temple. Now convinced that this is his greatest trial, Wukong wept as he mourned for his poor master and the many deities that are now suffering because of his inability to defeat the Yellowbrow. And at this lowest moment of Wukong's life so far, an auspicious cloud descended from the heavens next to him as a big-eared and big-bellied Buddha with a big smile stepped down from the cloud and greeted Wukong. Recognizing him immediately as the Mila Fo, or the future Buddha, Wukong quickly bowed in respect as he asked Mila Fo why he was here. Mila Fo responded by explaining that he's here to help Wukong deal with the Yellowbrow, as Yellowbrow is actually one of his disciples who was originally in charge of playing the percussion instrument of bianqin in his temple. And back during the 3rd day of March, Mila Fo had to leave his temple to attend a meeting with the founding deity of Taoism, which is when Yellowbrow abandoned his post and left for the mortal realm with a few of Mila Fo's treasures. First, there is the mace, which is actually transformed from the striking stick that is used to play the bianqin. Second is the cymbal, which is another percussion instrument from his temple. And last but not least is his human seeding sack, which is used for mortal reincarnations. Now, having learned the backstory of Yellowbrow and his 3 weapons, Wukong immediately got mad at Mila Fo for his oversight and demanded for just punishment. But Mila Fo simply brushed off the accusation as he explained that this was destined to be one of their many trials, and he's now here to aid Wukong in taming Yellowbrow. Still spooked by Yellowbrow's sack, Wukong worried at the sight of the unarmed Mila Fo, but Mila Fo had a plan as he told Wukong that he would set up a melon field at the foot of this mountain, and all Wukong would have to do is lure Yellowbrow here by pretending to lose to him in combat. Then once here, Wukong just need to transform into the biggest watermelon, and Mila Fo will make sure that Yellowbrow will consume Wukong. At that point, Wukong can do as he please inside the Yellow Brow's stomach, while Mila Fo will revert back to his true form and tame his disciple. Now, before Wukong will leave, Mila Fo would call him over to gift him one final spell to help him lure Yellowbrow in, as he would use his index finger, dipped in his own saliva, to write the character Jin, meaning to bind, in the palm of Wukong's hand. Mila Fo would go on to explain that all Wukong would have to do is flash this spell at Yellowbrow's face, and Yellowbrow would follow him to the ends of the earth. And thus, Wukong leaped his way to the Lesser Thunderclap Temple to face off once again with Yellowbrow. Now this time, when Yellowbrow learned that Wukong had come alone, he assumed that Wukong had finally run out of reinforcement and was ready to face his certain death. So he confidently marched out to face Wukong. At first sight, Yellowbrow immediately noticed that Wukong was holding his staff weirdly, as he was just using one hand, while the other hand was kept in a closed fist. So Yellowbrow curiously asked Wukong why he was only using one hand, and naturally, Wukong had no intentions of telling Yellowbrow about the bind spell hidden in the palm of his free hand, as he instead taunted Yellowbrow by saying that he needed only one hand to defeat him. Now, furious upon hearing this, Yellowbrow would launch himself at Wukong with his wolf teeth mace in hand, only for Wukong to flash the bind spell right in Yellowbrow's face before pulling away from the fight. With the bind spell taking effect, Yellowbrow lost his free will, as he had no desires to use his magical sack and instead opted to just chase after Wukong on foot. And as they approached the melon field, Wukong simply rolled into the ground, disappearing into thin air before reappearing as a big and ripe melon on the other side of the field. Having lost his target and still under the effect of the bind spell, Yellowbrow was both frustrated and tired from the pursuit on foot, so naturally he yelled for the farmer in charge of the melon field, as he demanded the farmer to pick out a nice ripe melon to help quench his thirst. Responding to Yellowbrow's demand, Mila Fo, who has now transformed himself into the appearance of a simple melon farmer, quickly ran out into the field to pick out the biggest, ripest, and juiciest melon, which of course is just Wukong in disguise. Unsuspecting of any foul play, Yellowbrow didn't hesitate one bit as he tried to bite into the melon, but just as he approached the melon with his wide open mouth, Wukong seized the opportunity, as he would slip right down Yellowbrow's throat and find himself inside Yellowbrow's stomach. What followed was the pinching, poking, and kicking of Yellowbrow's internal organs, as the pain would be enough to knock Yellowbrow onto the ground. And as he rolled left and right while pleading for mercy, Mila Fo reverted back to his true form, as he would smile down at Yellowbrow and ask him if he still recognized his master. Seeing Mila Fo standing before him, Yellowbrow immediately picked himself off the ground and started to bow down repeatedly, despite still suffering from the internal pains caused by Wukong. Mila Fo then snatched both the human seed sack and the mace from Yellowbrow, as he would effectively disarm Yellowbrow before asking Wukong to come out and spare Yellowbrow out of respect to him, as Yellowbrow was still his disciple after all. Hearing this, Wukong then instructed Yellowbrow to open his mouth wide and keep it open, as he would leap out, and also revert back to his true form. But at this point, Wukong was still incredibly angry at Yellowbrow for all the troubles he had caused, so immediately after Wukong came out of Yellowbrow's stomach, he would raise his staff with the full intention to kill Yellowbrow on the spot. Sensing Wukong's intention to kill, Mila Fo quickly opened his sack, and this time, instead of sucking Wukong into the sack captured Yellowbrow in a blink of an eye, and in the process, spared him from the killing blow from Wukong. Now, before Mila Fo would leave with Yellowbrow, he still wanted his golden symbol back. So after a brief chat with Yellowbrow, who was now imprisoned inside the sack, Mila Fo will learn that the symbol was now in 1,000,000 pieces, Fortunately, though, Yellowbrow kept all the pieces and put them atop of the Lotus altar in the main hall after Wukong had smashed it. So Mila followed Wukong back to the temple, and while Wukong busied himself killing the monster still inside the temple, Mila blew a breath of air onto the shattered symbol, and after reciting a quick Buddhist mantra, the golden pieces of the destroyed symbol reorganized themselves back together like magic. Now, with all his treasures in hand and Yellowbrow successfully captured, Mila finally bid Wukong farewell. For Wukong, however, the job was not done, as after clearing out the temple, he would quickly locate his master and two fellow junior disciples in Wuneng and Wujing before freeing all of them. As they had been tied up for a few days now, Bajie was famished, so before he could even thank Wukong for rescuing them, he dashed for the kitchen, as not long after, he would bring back 2 bowls full of food for everyone to eat. Meanwhile, Wukong reported everything that had transpired to his master Tang Seng, who after hearing about the captured deities in the dungeon, quickly ordered Wukong and Bajie to go free them first. By this time, Bajie had already eaten his fill, so together they searched the temple for the dungeon before finally finding it and freeing all the deities inside. At this point, Wukong gave his thanks and paid his respect to all his reinforcements, as he would personally escort the 5 dragons, Turtle General, and Snake General back to Mount Wudang, before escorting the Crown Prince Xiaozhang and his 4 deity generals back to Bincheng, before also escorting the 28 constellation deities back to the Celestial Court, and last but not least, escort the 5 gatekeepers of Buddhism back to their respective directional jurisdictions. As for the party going west, they would rest roughly for half a day inside what remained of the Lesser Thunderclap Temple to recover, feed the horses, and gather their belongings before finally lighting the entire temple on fire on their way out of the door, as the journey to the west would continue. And with that, the story of the Lesser Thunderclap Temple and Yellowbrow from the original Journey to the West novel is complete. Hopefully you all have enjoyed this retelling, and if you want to check out more content in regards to Journey to the West or the game Black Myth Wukong, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Lastly, I will appreciate any support for this video and the channel in the form of a simple like, share, or comment, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!